So, change the camera angle again for posterity. Today I think I'm just going to do a whole lot of yellow because, as you can see, it's pretty bluish back here, and really this is all pretty green leaves. So I'm just going to slap a whole bunch of yellow on with this big brush. Yeah, I did audio checks this time, so that shouldn't happen again, but probably might. I don't know. It wasn't too bad. I still don't know what I've recorded for that, because I'm not going to edit the video until after this, so but I bet it was great. Like these flowers. So the first thing I was going to talk about today was resistance training, and I guess actually I suppose I mean to say interval training as well. Interval training, I guess I'll start with that, is any sort of cardiovascular exercise where you push yourself as hard as you can for a short period of time and then you recover from it. So this could be sprints. You could sprint as fast as you can, like 100 feet, and then walk back or jog back. You could do a whole bunch of jump ropes and then take a break, or do jump ropes really fast and then take a break and do jump ropes really fast. You could do similar things with swimming. There's the best thing I found for me is running. Biking isn't really consistent enough, really difficult exercise even when you're hitting really hard hills, at least for me. So running, it's just always possible to push yourself pretty hard into exhaustion, and that's sort of the big thing I wanted to talk about, is how it's increasingly. I mean, I found this myself, and it was noticeable, and but it's all about pushing your muscles to exhaustion. You hear bodybuilders talking about it, but you hear doctors much more importantly talking about it, and you can feel it, and the first time you do it especially, it is, depending on what muscles you pushed, it can be pretty debilitating, but yeah. And so bodybuilders do this for muscle hypertrophy, which is just having big old freak muscles, and so because of bodybuilder culture, that just happens to be a lot of people who are into fitness or into that aspect of it. A lot of people aren't looking to make their muscles bigger, and that's fine, because you can do resistance training, which is good for everyone to do because it's good for your heart. So by that I mean lifting weights. Push-ups work pretty great. You only really need to do stuff once a week. Again, like if you do it in a circuit, and you do like sets of 6 reps or whatever, and you rotate in the circuit and you just do it for like 30 minutes, or if you just push it really hard and just try to work those muscles to exhaustion. There's a lot of ways to do it. Lower weight and more reps, I mean, does seem to work pretty well, but you can also just do lower weight and do it much slower, and I find that to work pretty well for trying to stimulate or trying to cause like muscle exhaustion. And if you're not like really going hard, and you're not hypertrophy for muscles, it seems to be in particular, like if you're doing low weight and slow or lots of reps or in an extended circuit or something, you're not going to become a muscle-bound freak, so like you don't have to worry about that. I think you have to do like assisted lifts to get really huge, and do the stuff that damages people's joints, and that bodybuilding is kind of known for, squats and bench presses and stuff like that. But if most people aren't looking for that, and the best argument for resistance training is that you have so many heartbeats, it lowers your heart rate or your beats per minute. And it's what kills most people if cancer doesn't. And you don't want to be on those drugs, I mean, until as late as possible. Like, it would be great to not die, or to die not on blood statins, or whatever the replacement is by then. So yeah, that's the reason to do resistance training, especially for men, especially for like taller people. If you don't want to have heart attacks, you can just sort of assume that if you live really poorly, you're gonna really have a high risk for heart attack, and going on blood statins, just having to go on a medication changes how your body's signaling works, and I mean, side effects are real, and often it really affects your quality of life. And then a lot of times long-term side effects for these drugs haven't been studied in huge groups, because how do you do a 20-year study of a 5-year-old drug? And I mean, there's extensive studies to get them on the market, but it's just not that. We're not looking. So omeprazole is a good example of a drug that was recently found to increase dementia, and that is a heavily prescribed drug. I mean, this isn't unfounded. So yeah, resistance training, cardio are really great for lowering your heart rate. I mean, and then exercise is also enjoyable and all that stuff, but if you do interval training and you do like difficult intervals, you don't have to do it much a week. You can spend 30 minutes running a week or less, probably less for a long time, and you can do your resistance training twice a week for half an hour. And Scooby on YouTube is really good. There's some stuff that I think his information's kind of outdated, and there's some stuff, yeah, I mean, he's not perfect, but he's really good for YouTube, and he's definitely coming from the right place. So design workouts that feel right for you and don't break your bones. I don't think a personal trainer is really necessary for most people. Even if you can afford one, it's just like, this is information that you should want to get, because you should be concerned for your health. And if you gather this information, you'll become even more motivated. And so it's good to do the research yourself. Cool. I'm getting ready to dry this off pretty soon. Yeah, I'm gonna do a lot of yellow this video, because I really want to make stuff start looking more green. Alright, so it's more dry now. I'm gonna go in for more yellow. Yeah, you don't need to exercise all the time. You don't need to run every day. But it's definitely a good thing to do on a regular basis. It makes you feel better, makes your brain work better. Yeah, and then all those obvious vanity reasons that you just pretend aren't the reasons you do it. You can kind of see this patterning over here, which is from the soft press. It seems like the phthalo blue is going more into that than the other colors. Oh, this isn't soft press, sorry, this is cold press. And yeah, cold press, it's great. It makes your stuff look blurry. Yeah, I mean, with heavier pigments and different watercolor styles, cold press makes a lot of sense. It's not what I use. I don't mind it though. And hypothetical grandma's not going to mind it either. So yeah, this is going to be kind of different. I'm going to talk about a fairly broad, I mean, this is probably just going to, this next topic is multi-tiered, I should say. And so it is I talked about it last week, but it's part of the audio that was lost. But this will be a little more comprehensive, I guess. And I'm talking about not consuming animal products. So being a vegetarian, and by which I mean a vegetarian, but people say vegan, but it's like you're not consuming any. Yeah, it's semantics. It's because I too knew the terrible vegan in high school who, like, who just did it seemingly to act ethically superior, and then was also straight edge, and then like fell off both of those things pretty much as soon as he tasted alcohol, and yeah, it's like that turns people off, and those people don't do a favor for other people who really think it through. I had known vegetarians existed since a young age. I knew a couple in school, but so I guess also one thing I want to say right off is that I'm not a vegetarian for health reasons. I think you can have a really healthy vegetarian diet, and it's maybe easier to have a really healthy vegetarian diet, but I don't think the absolutely optimal human diet would be vegetarian. I mean, yeah. I mean, how I guess it could be, but there seem to be a lot of amino acids, particular amino acids, and stuff like that. Not to mention B12, which you need from delicious feces-infested meat. There's all sorts of stuff that meat. So, for instance, eggs. Like, eggs are a complete protein. They're great. There's... Yeah, this... I mean, I guess that's the thing, is I don't know how someone authentically makes the counter-argument. I haven't really thought a lot about it. There's a lot of people, vegetarians especially, they fall into the confirmation bias for their point, and they just think it's better for every possible reason. And I just eating game meat, like, I just don't. Game meat now, maybe there's mercury in it, maybe it's not, but man, what would be the odds if our ideal diet was perfectly vegetarian and it was out of things available right now? But I guess that remains to be proven, and that's one of the other things. I don't think it's conclusive on either side. Going into that, I want to talk about the argument that swayed me, or I think I might have been coming from an ethical standpoint the whole time, but I was young and male, and there's nothing wrong with needing a good reason, and I needed a real good reason that looked good on paper, and I hadn't studied ethics at all at that point, and I had only ever heard people making very weak ethical arguments. And so I was definitely not swayed from that point, or from that perspective. So what I'm going to talk about is like the economic or environmental argument, which is that producing meat products, like including eggs, animal products, consumes disproportionate amount of energy, 16 times, and water, than just make growing vegetable protein and consuming that. It's pretty well documented. They've tested it repeatedly. Seems to be pretty true. It makes a lot of sense, because you have to eat another animal that's been eating grass, or been eating vegetables, which you might not have been able to eat, but, something you could have eaten could have been grown on that land. It just takes a lot of resources. And so that's the reason that swayed me. I stuck onto eggs for the longest. I basically just intentionally didn't research it the longest, I suppose. I thought I read an article, and I actually read like an article on a database. It wasn't just like a New York Times article or whatever that said that eggs were lower, but that was upon further investigation of the literature. I shouldn't have just taken one journal, but I was like 21, and like people have committed worse sins, and this is a period of 3 months, like this huge difference. So yeah, I checked the research and found that that did not seem to be the case. And so I stopped eating animal products because I want the world, civilization, to continue to exist and thrive. I like art, I like people, I like being alive, I like civilization. It's all pretty great. And so also I want to live a long time, and I need people, or I mean, you need a society around you. You can't just live in a bunker. So I think global warming's real. I've never not, well, I've never, I suppose I also sort of put off thinking about global warming because I knew it would be really inconvenient, and so I didn't really start modifying how I live my life until I was like early 20s, maybe 20 years old. And yeah, it's kind of a moral imperative if you're trying to be a good person, is to, I mean, decide if it's, figure out if it's real, and there's just overwhelming evidence from people in the fields who are like credited scientists, and also it's been like sort of demonstrably true for a long time. And I mean, it just physically, it's based on a physical effect that a guy talked about in, I think, 1892, and it's replicatable in laboratory settings. The CO2 trapping heat. So yeah, Sculiolio. I don't think a lot of people are gonna not think global warming is real, but I definitely thought it was real, but I just was putting off the personal responsibility part of it because I was a child and I was selfish, as we all are, because our brains command us to be. And so that's why you need to figure out good reasons to modify your behavior, so that you know that you're going to be a greedy monkey in your day-to-day, but you can slowly change yourself, so you deal with people more equitably. You can just drill into yourself certain reasons are compelling. I mean, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's hard for some people just because of their personalities or whatever. Maybe it's particularly easy for me, but yeah, being reasonable is great. 4 out of 4 stars. So then the next argument is the ethical argument, which is sort of what I was talking about before, which I had heard before. I think I'm going to do some magenta with this little garbage brush. Yeah. So the ethical argument is, hey, y'all, animals feel pain, animals live lives, animals, some of them mourn their dead, pigs are very intelligent, goopy goop, maybe they have souls. And there's all sorts of versions of it. I think there are many Christian versions of it, just explicitly religious versions of it. I don't believe any of those, but yeah, what distinguishes us from animals? And I'll get more into this later, but is it intelligence? Because we can have somebody who is severely damaged mentally, who we still consider a person, and we should consider people. And yeah, I mean, it can't, so it really, I don't think it is intelligence based, and I also don't see a ton of compelling evidence for that being a good enough reason. if you can do it otherwise, and you can still live, you know, in your 80s or 90s. So I think the ethical argument can be phrased compellingly, but with me, I would just always try to go for. I mean, so there's two ways you can go, I guess, and I usually go one. And so you can use the argument you think is the most compelling to that particular person, and that is probably more effective than what I do, which is I use the argument which I think is the most reasonable and the most reasonably compelling, and from a dispassionate viewer. So that would be my economic argument, or the environmental argument. It's just that you want us to be able, you want society not to collapse. Global warming is real. It is in your interest to act on it. You can have a large impact by yourself. I think making the economic argument to people is a better way to go about it. And so I don't use the ethical argument. I mean, I don't really try to convince people of it a lot, I guess, because it's people generally accept almost all arguments for vegetarianism. In my experience, they just don't care. Like, they just don't. I mean, it's not a priority. Their lives, they feel that their lives are difficult enough that they don't need. It's like too bad. So it's not. I mean, that you're gonna run into that, and that's why you shouldn't try to become like an evangelical proponent of this stuff. You should figure out other courses of action. You shouldn't be proselytizing to people. You should broach the argument about it once, and then if they say something later that relates to it, you can talk about it then. And if they do things that make you feel uncomfortable, you tell them explicitly that you don't like going out pig punching with them or whatever, and then you just don't be passive aggressive about it, and just talk to them like humans, and just make it clear to them that it's something you really care about. This one's looking weird. This flower. This flower is looking really kind of weird. It looks like some sort of weird nut. I think I'm going to make this one darker to bring out that bottom bit, the white bit. I think I'm going to have to probably do a few layers of that. So, yeah. Cool. So, yeah. Leather. I think it's reasonable to buy leather stuff because it is a byproduct of the cattle industry. You're tangentially supporting it, but those animals would be being murdered in mass for the foods. Like, if they could make more meat and less skin, like if they could change a cow to do that, it probably would. So yeah, I mean, if you need something, you absolutely need something, and it's really only made. So there's basically other things I'd prioritize for. Try to buy stuff that's made in a country with labor laws and that isn't a totalitarian hellscape. And if the only thing that exists is leather, maybe it's a shoe or a belt clip or something, that's fine. It's all right. Like, it's gonna be okay. Yeah, but I mean that might be wrong. My argument might be wrong, and it might be that the only way we can sell meat is this cheap is because of leather. So because leather adds so much value, but it's like leather's cheap. Like sheets of leather are pretty cheap when you think about it. Yeah, coolio. At least last time I looked, they could be more expensive now. Leather could be much more expensive. Well, A lot of the expense in leather garments is because they're hard to make. They need to be made out of good materials to hold together because it's strong fabric. And then brushes, paintbrushes. So yeah, my paintbrushes are not made of animal fibers, which is fine because synthetic paintbrushes are really pretty good now. Obviously, I'm not the best, but lots of people get really good results with synthetic brushes. It's like beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, especially in watercolor painting. Actually, this is more so for like comic book inks. There's a red sable brush, no, Kolinsky sable brush, which I don't want to get too much into that, but it's a male Siberian weasel. They get the guard hairs from the tail. There's not a huge amount of guard hairs available per weasel. You can't really just ask the weasel for them. They kill the weasels, they trap them, they hunt them with dogs. No good. Yeah, your art's not that precious that you need to murder weasels for your paintbrushes. So yeah, get some synthetic brushes. If you're an older artist and you have those brushes or whatever, you can get them secondhand. Or yeah, you're murdering an intelligent animal in a state of terror so that you can paint watercolor flowers for your grandma. And it's like, would grandma really want to hear the screams of a tortured weasel? You know, my grandma might have. I don't know. I can't. She's passed away to the nether dimension, so I can't ask her now. But I think I had a grandma who probably wouldn't have minded too much, but she was hardcore, and not every grandmother is that hardcore. Yeah. Hog hair. I mean, animal hair brushes probably do work better. People tell me they work better. I find synthetic brushes to be really consistent, really cheap, not made of dead animals. I don't really have complaints that aren't my own incompetence. Yeah. So I use synthetic brushes. I would avoid so there's, I like, Fabriano uses a vegetable sizing for their paper, which is nice. Stuff that is that limited in consumption, I don't worry about as much as food, which you eat every day. Alright. I'm not in love with this brush. I don't think I did anything cruel to it. It's a Princeton 4950R. 4950? Yeah, that's how you'd say it, cool like. It looks really neat. It's middling for their brushes. It wasn't super expensive. It's a number 2. I just get a split that I don't get in my other number 2s. It kind of retains a point. Not super important in watercolor because it's not like black ink where you really want a good point. Yeah, well, it's alright though. It was pretty cheap. It was like $4 because everywhere sells stuff a whole bunch off retail. And I don't have a local art store. So I do have like in Dungeons and Dragons there's this thing called mimics which hide in dungeons, and they look like treasure chests, but then you go and they bite you in the face, and I have one of those for like as related to an art store. Like it masquerades as an art shop, but then you go in there and you find that reality is not as real as you thought it was. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a 2-color mixture of yellow and phthalo blue. And I haven't done a mixture yet because I like to have a varied, the background layers show through more. So if you use a paint mixture for a huge area, you might have more uniformity than you're looking for. That said, who knows what's going on with the background? that spot that's white, I'm just going to do with that 2-color black mixture, which I might actually do next video. Who really knows? So yeah, grab a huge old glob of blue, throw it in my, or sorry, big glob of yellow. Generally you want to mix the stronger staining one into the weaker one. So like you'd want to start with yellow and then put a little bit of blue in it. But I sort of just took a huge chunk of yellow and smashed it into a tiny bit of yellow blue, and it worked all right. Maybe it did. We'll see. But so the next thing we're going to talk about related to the animal stuff is pet ownership. This is more of an ethical argument, but it doesn't have to be. You can make the economic argument because pets are pretty much obligate carnivores. So they gotta eat meats, and so it's like you could have a dog, and your dog has a huge carbon footprint related to you. And if it's not worth it for you, is it worth it for your dog? So yeah, you can have that. It's sort of basically the same argument, except that the ethical argument is easier to make because people just, a dog is a social animal. You can't have it in your house alone all day, or it goes insane. Pure breeding dogs is extremely ethically questionable. They're intelligent animals. It just seems really obvious, and so it's hard to proselytize about it, I suppose, because if you accept a vegetarian argument, then you kind of, if you're being intellectually honest with yourself, it extends to animals. And there's exceptions. You could only get rescue dogs, and you could live at home all day. You could be home pretty much all day and have a couple dogs that you take care of. And yeah, it'd be good if someone took care of rescue dogs. And around here, everyone I know has rescue dogs. That has dogs. At least that have gotten them in the last 10 years. And so I know a lot of people don't, though. Mostly people newer to pet ownership, it seems to me. You really need to be home all day. You need to be willing to spend a huge portion of your life taking care of this animal and entertaining it, because that's your job. That's what you brought it into the world for. And you have to feed it meat. And so if you're a vegetarian, unless you accept a moral necessity of rescue ownership, it's difficult. It's just like your dog is consuming a lot more resources than you are yourself as a full-grown human, and is that really worth it for you to get involved with? But there could be a dog that you really think, it really needs to be taken care of well. Something bad could happen if it wasn't, and stuff can come up. So yeah, but generally that's just someone who is being super reasonable, and you do run into people who are super reasonable about pets, but for a lot of people, they just don't think about it at all, and they just do really cruel stuff to their animals without thinking about it, and it just doesn't, that level of concern doesn't seem to be there for them, as far as what the animal would want to be doing with its time, or maybe the pure breed issues of the animals, like bulldogs can't mate unassisted, which is just so that's impossible in nature. You only need you need man to intervene for that, because it's sort of it selects itself out for evolution. So yeah, it's purebred dogs are grotesque, and it's like it's obviously, think about what an outsider would think about those customs, and it seems like it will be pretty mainstream in the future. I think one of these problems is that PETA is I suppose not the worst. PETA is just a horrible organization as far as what they're trying to do. They've just done a really awful job. Their PR campaigns are miserable. I think they turn more people off than they attract. I think they only preach to the converted, and I think that probably most of the people that are the type are, I don't know, PETA vegans or PETA vegetarians. I think those people probably have pretty poor reasoning, and those people probably would also believe in witches and ghosts and all sorts of and new age nonsense, and they probably don't have. Yeah, it's just like, it's not the way to make an argument showing videos of animals getting ground up or whatever. You're not going to have people keep the behavior change over the long term if you just use an appeal to emotion to try to sway them. You might get some people, but yeah, it's not like an honest way to go about it. That didn't really take as long as I thought. I'll probably talk more about it in the future. The screen is going on pretty nice. I'm using this big old brush still. I probably should switch to my coward brush, but I'm not gonna. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Stan Rogers. Stan Rogers was a Canadian folk singer that was active from the mid-70s to 1983. When he died, an airplane that he was on caught fire. He escaped, but he went back in to help people out and asphyxiated. So, yeah. In other words, he died a hero. So he wrote a lot. Some of the folk stuff was covers, but he wrote a lot of his songs, and they were sort of famously pretty particular to Canada, about Canadian areas or about Canadian history, and the songwriting is fantastic. It's just so good. His the focus on his albums, so it's hard to, for me, songs talk about something or tell a story in a coherent fashion that is either self-referential or builds or isn't. I generally think that a song with one verse and a chorus, and that's it, and you just have a chorus that repeats over and over again. Like, I don't really want to have that. I like folk music because it tells a story or because it carries a message, and Stan Rogers is really great for that. Northwest Passage is one of his more famous songs. It's really good. It sounds really good. It talks about the Northwest Passage. It has great imagery. It sounds very good. It's all choral. Not all of his stuff is. Most of his stuff has instruments, but that song doesn't, and it's really fantastic. There's another song, the Mary Ellen Carter, which has a particular. The whole song is just fantastic. It's I guess you'd say it's inspiring. It's truly inspiring. There's a video of a guy that for a documentary they were making before he died, a short documentary. Actually, well, they made it before he died, and they have an interview with a guy who says the song saved his life. And you can find that on the YouTube too. The last verse, which is really great, goes, and you to whom adversity has dealt the final blow, with smiling bastards lying to you everywhere you go, turn to and put out all your strength of arm and heart and brain, and like the Mary Helen Carter, rise again, rise again, rise again. Though your heart it be broken or life about to end, no matter what you've lost, be it a home, a love, a friend, like the Mary Ellen Carter, rise again. And that's the verse that the guy who says it saved his life was talking about, and it's just so good. Yeah. Music's really important to me, and I think it should be important to people, because I think it's pretty important, and it's really unique, and I think it's a huge part of culture, how it's been used, and what it means to people, and the associations or emotions it can invoke, or the imagery. One musician that Stan Rogers was in contact with, and his brother later toured with, was a Scottish musician named Archie Fisher, who wrote a song. The first song I heard by him was called Witch of the Westmoreland, which is a song about a knight who's wounded in battle and is told by a talking crow to go find a centaur lady so she can lay him down and cure all his wounds. And it's fantastic. I mean, it's the best song about centaur sex you're ever going to hear. And it's got a great chord progression, it's got a great melody. Stan Rogers does a great job in singing it, although I really like the Archie Fisher version too. He spells it differently. So yeah, it's Witch of the Westmoreland. Archie Fisher wrote it, and Stan Rogers did a cover of it. He got the proverbial hit, the folk hit. Yeah, I'm gonna get the water out of this. I'm gonna go to my coward brush. And there's some bits I noticed I missed before, but I'm gonna start getting really down low on. The next thing, I only have a couple minutes. We're using a DSLR camera to film, and it limits the videos to 20-minute chunks. So, thus having really any cuts at all, because I could probably just do this all in one take. So yeah, I guess the appeal of folk music to me is that it tells, well, not just that it tells a story, but it's just sort of the reality of the music. So much of recorded music existed explicitly in a commercial culture, and it was people doing stuff like other people to get hits. And it's not, and with folk music, there's very sad songs that tell specific stories, and the style, is straightforward, and you hear the words, and it's easy to perform. It's easy to learn a few chords and perform folk music. It is a very great exemplar of poetry and songwriting, even though a lot of times the authors are unknown. There's a verse from the song The Rocky Road to Dublin, which goes, In Dublin next arrived, I thought it such a pity to be so soon deprived of view of that fine city. Then I took a stroll among the quality. My bundle it was stolen, a neat locality, and something crossed my mind when I looked behind. No bundle could I find upon me stick, a wobblin' inquiring for the rogue. They said my cunnet brogue wasn't much in vogue on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin walk full all the raw. And so what I like about that is that wobblin', that rhyme goes through the whole song, and it's really unique to the song. And then oh, it's my horrible dog. Well, I suppose yeah, it's so horrible. It's not my dog though. It's someone else's dog. Ooh, you're so horrible. Alright. So yeah, obviously, also another thing about the pet ownership, this comes, not without personal experience. I really like animals. I love animals. I don't want to harm them, like on a basic level. I have a lot of experience raising dogs specifically, but also we had ferrets. And yeah, now he's making all sorts of horrible noises, so I think I'm gonna take him to solitary, take him to the terror dome. Yeah, other things that are insane about pet ownership, without getting too into it. People walk around pets, large animals like German Shepherds, just not on leashes. So then other people run into those dogs with those animals not on leashes, and they just have a dog battle. Electric fences. If you have one of those, you hear Goebbels. like what is wrong with you? Think about it. Yeah, electric fences. I mean, man, that's no good. Yeah, I'm gonna try this off and then talk about a couple more things. Man, these flowers are looking fantastic. Coolio. So, a big part of the thing I was talking about before, I think about food a lot. This is why I think I probably was a vegetarian as early as I was, because I just think about food a lot. I like to eat food because it's delicious. So I made it a priority, and a big part of eating the best food is learning to cook. Also, if you can't cook, you have to pay restaurants to make you garbage food. And, I mean, it might be alright where you live, but I live in a wasteland, where there is no... I mean, there's food that tastes good, but it is not healthy for you. And so it's really hard to get anything, like that's vegetarian and not covered with sugar, for instance. So, learn to cook. If you can't cook, start cooking. Right now. Something easy to make. How bad are you? Real bad? Alright. Get a steamer. You put these on top of a pot of water you boil. Right? Alright. Get some broccoli. Wash the broccoli. Take off the leaves. And cut the broccoli into even-sized pieces with a knife. Stop. You don't have a knife. Get a good knife. It's worth the $50 to $100 you'll spend to get a German or Japanese or even an American-made cooking knife. I personally use what's a Chinese chef's knife, which people call vegetable cleavers sometimes. Also, I've heard Chinese cleaver. Yeah, you can use those. You can cook all sorts of stuff with just one of those. You don't need a paring knife. You can use one of those as a paring knife. They're fantastic. There's a couple more advanced cleaver styles. that I can't remember the names of. There's a Japanese style that's kind of like a hybrid cleaver. Like it has a point, but you don't need that. Just get it. Yeah. One thing with vegetable cleavers, if you're cooking meats, don't chop bones with them. They're vegetable cleavers. They stay sharp because they're thin. They're easy to sharpen. You just have to get a steel. You don't even have to use a whetstone. Good stuff. It costs money, but you save a whole lot of money if you just don't pay restaurants for all your food bucks. Yeah. This is more of that green. I'm using it up. I noticed that I have some stuff I need to add on the branches, and so I'll get to that as well. This looks like a strange sort of three-dimensional, roughly rendered object. Some of the initial heavy layers of pigment don't look much like the image, but we're going to make it our own, like Bob Ross commands us to. And so cooking, like I said, steaming is a really good way to cook vegetables. Eat those vegetables. That's covered in a previous video. They make you live forever. And if you don't live forever, just let me know, and I will publicly apologize. Yeah. Vegetables, easy to steam, easy to cut them up. So this is step one. You just learn to cut things. Different things cut in different ways. Carrots you can split, and you can cut them. If you cut things in small pieces, they'll cook quicker. Cut them all the same size so they cook evenly. If you cut like carrots really thin but wide, they'll cook differently because they'll dry out. You learn these things, and learning's fantastic. And the food tastes better than food at chain restaurants, which a lot of America just has chain restaurants or like small diners or mom and pops, and that sell really similar food from a lot of the same distributors. And yeah, and it's not like that's the thing, I didn't make a super informed, rip-roaring decision to learn to cook. I just really like food, and my dad couldn't cook, and my mom worked weird shifts, so it's like, learn to cook and you can eat more food. The incentive was there. And so I did. A lot of people start with pasta, but pasta's not that great for you, and it's good to just start chopping vegetables as soon as possible. It will seem like it takes time that otherwise you weren't spending. It's worth it, though. I mean, it's really worth the time building the skill and saving the bucks, and I think it's really the healthiest way to eat is controlling all your food. Some people might live in areas that have really great vegetarian restaurants or whatever, or just, and that's awesome. But I don't. A lot of people, I think, probably don't. I imagine there's not of, well, I don't know. Maybe Kansas has a lot of really nice vegan restaurants. They probably do in the cities, in the Wichita. I don't even know if that's in Kansas. It's been a while. I'm almost used up my green. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Patreon. Recently there was a whole... They banned a string of users. Lauren Southern, and It's Going Down. And that's pretty good stuff. Their explanation for that was super reasonable. The dude was super reasonable. It all made sense. it built his case built on itself logically with a premise he explained and repeatedly referred back to, which I think was manifest behavior, observable manifest behavior, or something like that. And yeah, reasonable argument, reasonable dude, seemed pretty passionate about what he was doing. But here's the thing, still think you should probably have more Patreons. One or two more. Competitions, I don't even think it's so much competition, but redundancy. Just if one of the companies, something happens to compromise it, an insane chimpanzee wrests control from the shareholders, and it threatens to destroy the one company, and you just really need to get the widgets that they produce, it's better to have multiple companies. There might be more exposure if you just have Patreon, and I think internet people, Silicon Valley, it's like they want to move to this thing where there's no redundant services, and every service is exactly what it is, and it's similar to other ones, but it's not exactly the same. So like Patreon's kind of like Kickstarter, but it's not the same. And I think Patreon is a really good way for artists to make a living of all sorts, or people that have unpopular political views that don't make industry want to fund them. And it's pretty much a good thing. I just think there should be more companies, so there's redundancy, even more so than competition. I mean, there's no reason there can't be another company that works with Patreon and just has a different board of directors and different people in charge. Yeah. So I thought that was all really reasonable. I thought that guy's video was really reasonable. I'm glad they blocked It's Going Down's funding, because it is a trap, and it's also just dangerous and gross. And so it's good, I guess. The violence policy, it just seems reasonable to preclude, because that what I was saying before with free speech, it sort of ends when you're invoking violence, and apparently they agree at the Patreon. Yeah. Rip roarin'. These flowers probably don't look very different from the beginning of this video, and that'll happen. I'm building mostly the back, and I added a bit of magenta for style points for fan service, but really I've just been trying to build up this, and it looks blurry in the picture, and that's going to be my that's going to be what I shriek. Yeah, I don't know, it seems like there's little doodlies that are coming up out of the paper, but it might just be contamination from something else. This is the 300-pound paper. It does visibly buckle, which other paper I've used at 300 pounds didn't really buckle as much. I'm applying really heavy washes. Yeah, these flowers starting to look pretty good. I'm trying to define the edges with the green. Invariably I'll mess up and I'll go over and I'll make it worse, but it's nice to build sort of a border between the two colors. It makes the objects look more distinct. So that's why I like using hot press. Yeah, this first series of videos is going to look extra trash because I just switched to this larger brush, but more importantly, this brush is great. Yeah, Princeton Neptune, number 12. The other Princeton I didn't love, but this Princeton is fantastic, and it's a synthetic brush. Yeah, Princeton makes really good brushes, and you call the company and the dude answers, and the guy, the president that owns the company, and so not much to complain about there. They make their brushes all over the place. Yeah, you can't get brushes made in America or Germany or Japan. I think I'm about done here for this week. Although I could paint these flowers all day. Yeah. I wonder what I'm going to record for the previous video. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I have some ideas. But, I suppose you'll know before I do. In relative time. Which is the most important type of time because it's not real. Someone once told me there is no time. And so I pretty much devoted my life to spreading his word. Yeah. I think that border will look pretty nice. Next time on flowers, I think I'm gonna probably build that up more. Make it brown. That's hard to do in glazes. I'm probably gonna make a mix at this point. Alright. Shalom.